lovelies. How you doing? Well, I hope. Alright, housekeeping. Table Topless is finally, hopefully, back tonight, as nobody seems to be sick anymore. That was the problem. Various people had various issues, and then Cherry and Richard went to the AVNs and caught the con plague. Fortunately, not the genital con plague, but con plague nonetheless. So, yeah, hopefully nobody's sick anymore and we can get back into the swing of things. And I think the remaining 2 weekends of the month we will be doing Erotic, which is our erotic D&D game for the 2 streams for the rest of the month. So, yeah, hopefully, fingers crossed, but not legs. We'll be doing that tonight. I'm in a weird place with projects because I'm working on a variety of projects all at the same time, and also kind of managing or consulting on some things where I'm trying to do stuff differently than I do normally, and releasing some control to other people and so on. So it's a bit weird. I feel like I am constantly working, though I took 2 days off last week, and getting nowhere, like a cat running on one of those giant wheel exercise machine things that they have. So yeah, slow progress, but hopefully it will amount to something eventually. I am kind of tired and exhausted and somewhat burnt out, and a lot of that's down to the state of the world, I think, at the moment, which is ludicrous because it's not something I have any real control over. Yeah, I look at the successes of right-wing populism around the world and how much damage it is doing, and how much damage it's doing in the long term, and that fills me with a sense of dread. Maybe I shouldn't have studied politics and history because I feel a bit like Cassandra constantly. Like here in the UK, the Labour Party, who are currently in power, have front-loaded all the bad things that they feel they need to do. But unfortunately, that's making them deeply unpopular after they got such a large tactical mandate to keep the Conservatives out. But if they don't take some big swings and get some big successes on things that actually matter to normal people, that don't make a material difference in their lives, then it seems almost inevitable that a much further right Conservative Party, perhaps in some sort of pact with reform, will swing back into power. This is where Britain's innate small c conservatism is actually a source of hope rather than frustration for once. But still, it seems obvious, not only to me, but to the more politically literate and analytical podcasts and things that I listen to, that this is the case. We're also seeing the slow, painful, probable dissolution of NATO, and it's all down to one man and his stupidity and his bribeability. And without NATO, we don't have as much of a deterrent to expansionist warmongers like Putin. So that's definitely a concern. And the total capitulation to Putin, stemming from the United States, is horrifying in its short and long-term implications, because short-term they seem to be sidestepping around Ukraine to try and force them to cede territory to Russia, which is the aggressor, and somehow the fact that they have heroically managed to stand Russia off for so long is somehow meant to legitimize Russia taking their territory. Disadvantage of being a digital settler of the early internet, I suppose, and being so active on it. You know, I know people all around the world. I know people in Ukraine. Guy made some of my jewellery, lives in Ukraine. and my heart bleeds for them. It really does. And this is all on the whims of a senile idiot. And then we had J.D. Vance completely aggravating European leaders as well. Every accusation was a confession in that speech, as it seems to have been for a lot of things. Maybe we could admit Ukraine to the European Union at some kind of rapid extra pace and rearm more than we all already have been. But the fear of people like Reform of an EU military seems like a pretty fucking good idea right about now, because it would allow us to expand and rearm while also saving money through economies of scale. And you can increase defense spending in a way that is social investment. That's ironically how America does a lot of it. America's almost total absence of any decent welfare system is because they throw so much money into defense, and the defense industry acts as a kind of de facto and bloated and over-expensive version of a welfare system, granting people access to education and so on that otherwise wouldn't have access to it. So, you know, there's ways of doing it that are a net positive. Mostly, though, what's grinding me down, I guess, is people's depressing stupidity and or malice, I suppose. People just repeating whatever Doge or Musk says without investigating it. You know, I'm not kidding in that every single one of their claims that I've bothered to look into, which is about a half dozen at this point, turns out to be nonsense. To take just one example, this idea that there are 150-year-old people claiming welfare in the US. No. What it is that they're missing a date of birth, and the programming in old COBOL defaults to 1875 if you don't have a date of birth. So what it means is that there are people receiving social security payments and benefits for whom there is no date of birth on file. There can be many reasons for that: lost records, pre-digitalization, and so on. At least I think that's right. Some old programmers and so on that I know say this is the case in certain systems, and it seems likely, and Musk seems that stupid, so that seems likely. But yeah, it's the stupidity and malice that I find most disturbing, both sides of the Atlantic. The gullibility to go along with this sort of thing, the refusal to realise that you've been had, and then the idea that saving a few million here, a few million there, whatever, from programs that help people in the direst of straits, both in the US and abroad, and this is somehow going to be good, or that it will mean there will be more money for, you know, our own people, homeless veterans or whatever. When has a right-wing party ever done anything to address social ills rather than to make them worse? Why do you think taking food from the mouths of starving children in war-torn parts of Africa is going to make any difference to the water in Flint, Michigan? It's not. And which side of the political aisle, or which one more to the centre of the political aisle in the US, I guess, is more likely to do anything to help people, and which is not? Yeah, it's depressing. People are celebratory in their cruelty and indifference, and that's something I just... it sounds self-aggrandizing, but I can't seem to get my head around no matter how much I try. And so I try to be generous by saying it's stupidity rather than malice, because I think being ignorant and a bit dumb is excusable in a way that malice isn't. You know, I've tried to exist as a sort of bridge and counterbalance to a lot of people, to expose them to alternative ideas And that's only got me excoriated by both sides in all this time. And I don't know if I've ever made any difference in moderating people's points of view or showing that the right aren't always insane when they can complain, or that the left isn't always insane when they do something weird. But it's silly to think you can have that much influence, I suppose. Yeah, so that was a bummer. Let's move on to the comments. On Sapolsky's no free will argument, which was also a bummer, Ben Formhels, or I don't know how you pronounce that, anyway, says, frankly, I find the concept of a deterministic universe incredibly empowering. We're not responsible, nor have any responsibility for anything we do. I'm not responsible for all the shitty behaviour to my loved ones because of my schizoaffective disorder, and all the people I've ever bullied, beaten and robbed were just essentially mentally ill ultimately. The only power we have as humans is acceptance. As Alan Watts said, the drunkard who falls from the cart hurts himself less because of his inebriated state. How much more power can you gain from that to a level of calmness and peace with oneself when applied to all of life? I dare say most people do not feel that way because they want to have power and control of some kind over their life. There's a little phrase about atheism that feels similar. You know, being an atheist is like being the only sober one in the car and nobody will let you drive. This takes that to a much higher extent, meaning you're not even in control of your own body. Now, I don't believe that. I can see how some people would derive comfort from that, but I think for most people it's maddening and depressing, and I don't see any reason to think that it's true. As I went into great detail on. Beardy Ben says, a large set of humans deal with executive dysfunction, which is literally when a human gets stuck, unable to make a choice. They will be so relieved to find out their health and life struggles don't exist. Thanks, Sapolsky. I appreciate the sarcasm and humour, which tends to be how I approach philosophy, because it's all bollocks. And yeah, would people have executive dysfunction if everything was just the result of autonomous direct cause and effect? Probably not. PNPTCN says, Grim Jim, I hate philosophers. Grim Jim then launches into a philosophical essay. Good fun. I don't think anyone is solving fate versus fortune anytime soon. I don't hate philosophy necessarily. I hate philosophers. I feel that they are up themselves and they think they're much more important than they are. And you can say that's philosophy. I just say it's thinking and talking about stuff. And I think these things can be answered in a way philosophers rarely think they can be answered. So it's more the social construct of philosophy, if you will, that I hate. And I don't regard anything that I do as engaging in philosophy, while philosophers regard everything I do as being philosophy, no matter what it is. So, yet again, they can fuck off. On the fantasy and religion video, Wingus Ryu says, I think standard religions are hollow as well. So when you create things that imitate them, it's a farce of a farce. I've struggled with this myself. I don't like the idea of clerics or priest classes as being basically a wizard that can wear armor. In my recent Shadow Dark game, I made a basic faith for Memon. Some simple tenets, symbols and requirements for the cleric to have his abilities. The gods are still hidden though. It is a start, but still not happy with it. Toying with the idea that the monotheistic self-righteous are actually the evil ones, whereas the village witches and healers who worship the old gods are the good ones. That's not an unusual approach. It's a little bit hackneyed, but it works. So, by all means, go with that. I'm going to take the opportunity here to, not as a criticism of you, but to point out that religions don't have tenants. A tenant is someone who rents a room or a house from you. A tenet, T-E-N-E-T, is what religions have. You know, they're beliefs that you subscribe to, their ways and means of doing things and so on is tenets, not tenants. Strictly speaking, though, churches and temples have been big landowners throughout history, so you might well have church tenants and church tenets, just to make things even more confusing. But yeah, just some simple things is good. Or if you're running a medieval game, why not make the faith Christianity? Why pussyfoot around? You know, or perhaps a more open form of Judaism, perhaps, might work, keeping it different enough from Christianity to be more interesting and different, while keeping it the same enough for familiarity with people. I don't know, but like you, yeah, I don't think clerics or priests should be wizards that can wear armor, and just aren't allowed to use bladed weapons or whatever else. I mean, you could also work it up that it is just a different style of magic, and that all the religious stuff is unnecessary, and it's the chants and the gestures not the same as any other school of magic that really makes it work, but it has a different foundational basis, and then the religion has grown up around the magic, which would also make a certain kind of sense. So that's something you could do. Alexander Dunn says, "Good morning, Jim. Amazing you did the whole thing without a mention of Crawford's, blessed be his name, Godbound TTRPG, the Holy of Holies, or the Mithras approach to faith and magic, or the real-life examples of Sikhism, where living holy men say sensible, spiritually enabling guidance, or Moorcroft, where you're falling over gods and the concept of order and chaos. This topic definitely needs a part 2. Well, your sarcasm is certainly appreciated. You can't do everything in a video. People do drift away once you start going over 20 minutes or so. 10 minutes is the sweet spot. So you do end up having to leave things out. And given that not that long ago I reviewed Godbound, I think, and I've talked about not Mithras specifically but RuneQuest before, again relatively recently, I think, these seemed like things to cut. Plus Godbound really falls into that whole Greco-Roman pantheon, sons of gods sort of thing, which I kind of brushed against. On the Doomed channel video, which was shameless clickbait, and I hate to see the fact that it worked, but people were very complimentary, but I will not be reading any of the really complimentary comments out. W.LF says, "Are you related to King Cobra JFS? Feels bootleg. Start making booze." I get this more and more often as my channel grows and approaches towards 10,000 subs. I have searched Cobra JFS and been put off immediately, so I think this is meant to be insulting. I still don't really know who he is because I never really follow up on these accusations, and then I forget about it. Is he a lolcow? What's the deal here? Someone save me a Google and research who King Cobra JFS is and what, if anything, he has to do with me. Hunraku says, when talking about the kind of content I should do, any sort of widely useful how-to or DIY stuff is appreciated. Like your idea of how to design a naturalistic dungeon. I've been thinking about revisiting that in a sort of longer form, perhaps. I really do not like channels that use flashy graphics and jump cuts, but that results in my watching smaller channels that are primarily a hobby for their creators, not their livelihood. The content on those smaller channels tends to be better because it's just stuff the person is authentically interested in, not them pushing out content to grow/maintain viewers. Unfortunately, this also means that the sort of content I like is harder to find. Yeah, they haven't really solved for that problem, have they? I mean, I enjoy producing videos, and when I choose to put the effort in, I can produce a higher quality output. And I definitely have a sort of editing and creative style that's somewhat grungy and so on, that's out of style at the moment. But doing the channel has given me some work doing video editing and presentations and things, which is weird because I'm entirely self-taught and I'm not using industry standard sort of programs and things. So yeah, it's weird. It's part of me doing something that I enjoy, to dick around and make interesting intros and outros and everything, which is why I have so many of them, and why my channel ident is the fact that I don't really have a channel ident, because everything's different. So yeah, I feel the same. I'm often more interested in smaller, more honest channels. So maybe other Diddy channels, relatively Diddy channels like mine, maybe we can do some collabs. Maybe let me know some people I might be able to collaborate with. Leave comments to that effect, and let them know that I would be open to it as well. Other people you follow. The Eclectic Goat. I appeared on her channel a week, 2 weeks ago. I don't know. Time is an illusion. Lunchtime doubly. So I've lost track. But yeah, I went on her channel to talk about MERP the other week, and I'll probably be back on to talk about my writing or my game design at some point. Anyway, the Eclectic Goat says, YouTube would like you to appeal to the ADHD tendencies in so many people these days. They'll tell you that flash cuts, intense emotions, etc. keep viewers engaged. The thing is, engagement isn't the same as enjoyment. Tricking people's brains into thinking you can't leave, you might miss something, is also how creators get burnt out. Begin worrying about quantity over quality, and while it might jump subs quickly, it's also how your channel dies when the fad is over. This is why D&D channels are dying. They pigeonhole themselves, and as D&D dies, it's taking those channels with them. Couldn't agree more. Yes, those of us who refuse to engage in clickbaity videos won't grow as fast, but I'd like to think that means those who stay truly appreciate our content, and diversifying our topics means we aren't tied to any one company. You have interesting visuals, engaging topics, and a very non-stressful style that I at least enjoy. I hope you'll keep on keeping on, and I really hope to get you back on my show sometime soon to talk about your own works. Well, I will be happy to. The real problem with me appearing on more podcasts or interviews or whatever is time zones. I'm willing to work around them to a huge extent, but my weekends are now pretty packed, which also makes things difficult for people. But thank you, I appreciate the comment. On the nonsense pandemic video, Digital Spectre says, it's interesting that get a vaccine or find a new job was seen as force and totalitarian, but having to go to work while very sick or lose your job is not, usually by the same people. Yeah, I I agree. People have a very selective idea of what is totalitarian and what isn't. And like J.D. Vance, they often identify entirely the wrong thing as totalitarian while making excuses for or even being totalitarian themselves. Trapdoor Spider says, how do you know? What makes you immune to your own biases? How do you vet the sources? Are you sure you don't have a conclusion you're looking for support of? I'm aware of it. That is the main thing. I'm aware of my own biases, acutely aware. And I think this is... I don't like it when people say that their mental illness or neurospiciness is some sort of superpower, but I think this is a depressive superpower. The immense amounts of self-doubt and so on means that I research even things that I already consider to be true and hold to be true all the time. I don't tend to be confident in things that I haven't looked into, and I tend to doubt and question myself constantly, which is terrible for mental health, but it's very good for being able to examine your own beliefs. Even so, I don't think I'm immune. I'm making the effort in a way that a lot of people don't. And I think that's just that alone is a huge advantage when it comes to this stuff. So yeah, I'm burnt out, a little depressed at the state of the world, just trying to keep going, really. This too shall pass, when we're all burned away in atomic fire. Zang.
The atomic age, with its A-bombs, transistorized radios, jet engines, and a new breed of dangerous supervillain, requires heroes to face the challenge. That's where you come in. The world needs you, Agent. Agent of Swing.
Get used to disappointment.